Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going to mess with your head a little bit.
Just a little bit.
In a good way. We're tackling a topic that sits right at the intersection of how we think, how we learn, and, to be honest, how we judge people who don't think or learn exactly like we do.
It is a bit of a mind bender today. I mean, usually when we look at sources about neurodiversity or, different learning styles, the conversation's all about accommodation.
Right.
How do we help this person fit in?
Yeah, how do we get them to pass the test?
Yeah.
Or how do we get them to sit still in the meeting?
Exactly. But the source we have today, it flips the table on that whole conversation. It suggests that the way some brains process information isn't a glitch. It's not a different version of the norm. It is a completely valid alternative system of truth. And the reason it feels wrong to the mainstream isn't because it's broken, but because we're judging it by a rule book written like 2,000 years ago.
That is a bold claim. So we are looking at an excerpt from a piece by Jaime Hoerricks, a PhD, titled From Processing Difference to Epistemology, naming the Gestalt way of knowing.
Right.
And I have to say, when I first saw the word epistemology in the title, I had a flashback to college philosophy 101.
Oh, yeah.
I almost broke out in a cold sweat.
It is a heavy word.
Yeah.
But stick with us, because it's actually the key to the whole thing.
So our mission today is to move beyond seeing Gestalt processing, which, usually gets talked about in medical or special ed contexts as just a label for a kid who learns differently.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to unpack Hoerricks' argument that it is actually a whole pattern epistemology, which sounds fancy, but the source calls it a sovereign way of knowing.
Sovereign, that is a word that jumped out at me too.
It sounds empowering, but honestly, it also sounds a little isolating. Like, if it's sovereign, does that mean it's a totally separate island?
Can they even connect?
Yeah, can these two worlds even talk to each other?
That is the central tension here. And to understand why it feels like two separate worlds, Hoerricks argues we have to look at the paradigm we are currently living in. We have to see the box before we can see outside of it.
Okay, so let's paint a picture of the box. The source takes us on a bit of a time travel trip. We're going back to the greatest hits of Western philosophy.
Right.
But before we list the bearded guys in togas, can you explain why we are doing this? Why does a guy writing in ancient Greece matter to a parent dealing with an IEP meeting or, a manager doing a performance review today?
Because those guys wrote the source code for our society. Hoerricks centers this on epistemology.
Okay.
And simply put, epistemology is the study of knowledge. It asks, what counts as knowing? If I say, I know this is true, what proof do I need to show you for you to believe me?
It's the rules of the game.
It is the rule book for truth. And Hoerricks points out that our current rule book, it comes from a very specific lineage. It starts with Plato.
Okay, Plato, the cave guy.
The cave guy. But more importantly for us, the justified true belief guy. Plato argued that for something to be knowledge, you can't just believe it. You have to be able to justify it.
You need to show your work.
You need to show your work.
Oh, man. Show your work. That is the bane of every intuitive kid's existence in math class. You get the right answer, but the teacher marks it wrong because you didn't write down the steps.
Exactly. That teacher is channeling Plato. They are saying the truth isn't in the answer. The truth is in the step-by-step justification.
Okay.
Then you add Aristotle to the mix.
And what did he bring to the party?
Hierarchy. Categorization. Aristotle was obsessed with breaking things down into parts and ranking them. A leads to B. B is a subset of C. It's the file cabinet approach to reality.
So we have show your work and file it correctly.
Then fast forward a few centuries to Descartes.
I think, therefore I am.
Yep. Descartes was obsessed with certainty. He wanted to strip away anything that could possibly be a doubt. He wanted a foundation of absolute, unshakable bricks of fact.
He sounds like he'd be fun at parties. Are you sure this is a chip? Can you prove it's a chip?
Right. But think about modern science. Think about the scientific method. It is Cartesian.
Isolate the variable.
Prove the cause and effect. And then finally we have Locke. John Locke gives us the blank slate.
The idea that we're born empty.
Empty vessels waiting to be filled by sensory data.
Okay, so we have this lineup. Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Locke. They're all very logical, very structured. But again, let's ground this. How did these ideas leave the philosophy books and end up in our kindergartens and our HR departments?
Well, think about the Industrial Revolution. When we started building factories and mass education, we needed a standardized way to measure people. We took these philosophical ideas that knowledge is linear, built step by step, needing justification.
And we built this system around them.
We built the entire system around them.
So the system is designed for the brain that works like a bricklayer.
Exactly. This is the hidden assumption the source talks about, the brick-by-brick analogy. The dominant view assumes that meaning starts with fragments.
Right.
You take a brick, a fact, a sound, a letter, and you stack another brick on top of it. Eventually, if you stack enough bricks in the right order, you have a wall. You have knowledge.
It's bottom up. You learn the letters, then the sounds, then the words, then the sentences.
Correct. And here is the kicker. We assume that if you aren't building brick by brick, you aren't building anything at all.
That's the bouncer at the door of truth, checking IDs.
Yeah.
If you show up with a whole wall already built, the bouncer says, go back and show me the bricks.
Precisely. And this brings us to the conflict. Because not every brain is a bricklayer. Hoerricks introduces the concept of the Gestalt way of knowing.
Gestalt, it's a German word, right? Roughly means shape or form.
Yes, or whole, the whole pattern. If the standard way is building a wall brick by brick, the Gestalt way is, well, how would you describe it?
Based on the text, it feels more like downloading a high-res photo. You don't get the pixels one by one. You get the whole image instantly. You see the face, the emotion, the background, the lighting, bam!
All at once.
It's all there at once.
That is a great analogy. It's whole pattern epistemology.
Yeah.
But imagine being that person in a system designed for bricklayers.
You'd look crazy or broken.
And that is exactly what happens. The source lists the labels we slap on Gestalt processors. We call it a developmental quirk.
A learning difference.
Or we pathologize it as a deficit.
Let's get specific here, because I think this is where people get lost. What does this friction actually look like in real life? The source mentions language profiles.
Okay, let's talk about scripting, or what's clinically called echolalia. This is really common in autistic individuals who are often Gestalt processors. A child might repeat a line from a movie, say a scene from Finding Nemo, over and over.
Right. And in the brick-by-brick world, the lock-in blank slate world, we look at that and say, that's just noise. They're just parroting. They don't know what the words mean individually.
Exactly. We try to stop them. We say, use your own words. We try to break their script down into bricks. Do you know what fish means? Do you know what swim means?
But for the Gestalt thinker,
that entire scene, the music, the tone, the character struggle, is one unit of meaning. When they quote that scene, they aren't just making noise, they're handing you a zip file of emotion.
a zip file, I like that.
They might be saying, I feel lost and scared right now, and they're using the Finding Nemo scene as the vessel for that meaning.
That is, wow. Okay, so when we say stop scripting, we're basically deleting their zip file before they can unzip it.
We are rejecting their currency. We are saying, I don't accept whole scenes. I only accept individual words. We are prioritizing the form of the communication over the meaning of it.
Because our epistemology, our rule book says meaning has to be constructed from the bottom up. If you start at the top, you're cheating or you're confused.
Hoerricks uses strong language about how the system responds to this. We try to remediate it. We try to scaffold it. We break it down. We want to normalize the difference.
Remediate. That implies a remedy, which implies a sickness.
It implies a deficit. We define Gestalt by what it isn't. It isn't linear. It isn't fast in the way we want it to be fast. It isn't showing its work.
But this is where the source pivots, and this is the part I really want to dig into. Hoerricks says, stop looking at it as a deficit. It's a cognitive ecology.
I love that term, cognitive ecology.
Break that down for me. Why ecology? Why not cognitive system or cognitive style?
Well, think about the difference between a machine and a forest. A machine is linear. Gear A turns gear B. If gear A breaks, the machine stops. You fix the part.
That's the linear view.
That's the linear view. An ecology of forest is a complex, self-sustaining web. Everything is connected to everything else simultaneously.
So a Gestalt mind is like a rainforest.
In a sense, it's processing the temperature, the soil, the rainfall, and the growth all at once. It's a theory of meaning that relies on context. If you take a tree out of a forest and put it in a sterile white room, is it still part of the forest?
No, it's just a lonely tree.
And that is what we do to Gestalt kids when we force them into linear drills. We strip away the context of forest and ask them to analyze the lonely tree. And when they can't do it, or they refuse to do it because it has no meaning to them, we say they have the deficit.
Man, that is frustrating just listening to it. But let's go back to that word sovereign, a sovereign way of knowing. You agreed earlier that it sounds a bit isolating.
It does.
If I'm a linear thinker, which, let's be honest, most of us are trained to be, and my kid or my coworker is a sovereign Gestalt thinker. How do we bridge that gap? Or does sovereignty mean we just agree to disagree?
That is the crucial question. Hoerricks isn't saying we should segregate these thinkers. Sovereignty means respect. It means acknowledging that their way of arriving at the truth doesn't need to be translated into your language to be valid.
It doesn't need a visa to enter the land of truth.
Exactly. It stands on its own. It's a different center of truth.
A different center of truth. Give me a practical example of that. What does it look like when it works?
Okay, imagine a master troubleshooter in IT, or maybe a brilliant diagnostician in medicine. The linear approach is a checklist. Symptom A, check. Symptom B, check. Rule out C.
The brick-by-brick diagnosis.
Right. But have you ever met someone who just walks into the room, looks at the patient or the server and says, it's the intake valve, or it's a memory leak in the secondary drive? They just know.
When you ask them how they knew?
They can't always tell you immediately. They might say, it just looked wrong, or the pattern was off. That is Gestalt processing. They process the whole pattern, the sound, the look, the data instantly.
And usually in the workplace, we call those people wizards. We value that if they get it right.
We value it if the result is profitable, sure. But in school, or in a junior employee, we punish it. We say, you're guessing.
You're skipping steps.
You're skipping steps. We try to force them to use the checklist, and Hoerricks argues that by forcing them to use the checklist, we might actually be crippling their ability to see the pattern.
We're forcing the wizard to do data entry.
Essentially, we are prioritizing the justification, the Plato stuff, over the actual knowing.
It really makes you rethink the phrase, show your work. Maybe show your work is actually a form of gatekeeping.
It absolutely can be. It privileges one specific type of cognitive architecture over another.
So the source has a pretty direct call to action. It's a phrase that stuck with me. Change the system, not our minds.
It is a profound shift. We spend billions of dollars and millions of hours trying to change minds. Therapies, interventions, remedial classes, all designed to make the Gestalt mind look more linear.
Fix the glitch.
But Hoerricks says the mind isn't the problem. The system, the expectation that truth only comes in bricks, is the problem.
But playing devil's advocate here. The world runs on bricks. The bus schedule is linear. The tax code is linear. Can we really just change the system?
We don't have to burn it all down, but we have to expand it. We have to widen the doorway.
So instead of the bouncer checking for bricks, maybe he just checks for structural integrity.
I like that. It means accepting that someone can be on the roof without taking the stairs. If a student gives you the right answer but can't explain the steps, maybe instead of failing them, we ask a different question.
Like what?
What did you see that told you this was the answer?
Tell me about the pattern.
Yes. Describe the forest. Engage with their epistemology on its own terms. If a child is scripting a movie, don't silence them. Join the scene. Ask, what happened to Nemo right there? Was he scared?
That requires a lot of humility from us linear folks. It requires admitting that our step-by-step logic isn't the only way to be smart.
It requires dethroning ourselves. That's why sovereign is such a challenging word. If Gestalt is sovereign, then linear logic isn't the king of the world anymore. It's just one country on the map.
And nobody likes giving up the crown.
No. But look at what we're missing if we don't. That's the real tragedy Hoerricks points to.
What are we missing?
We are missing the truths that only exist in the whole.
Say more about that.
Well, think about a joke. If you break a joke down into its grammatical parts, subject, verb, punchline structure, is it funny?
No. Explaining a joke kills it. Everyone knows that.
Exactly. The humor is in the Gestalt. It's in the sudden collision of context and timing and expectation. You can only get it if you see the whole thing at once. If you analyze it brick by brick, the humor evaporates.
So by forcing everything into a linear box, we might be killing the meaning.
We are definitely killing some kinds of meaning. We're great at analyzing data, but maybe we're getting worse at understanding wisdom. We're great at the parts, but we're losing the whole.
That is a haunting thought. That our obsession with precision is actually costing us understanding.
It's the difference between knowing the chemical composition of a painting and knowing what it feels like to look at it. Both are true.
But one is a linear truth and one is a Gestalt truth.
And we desperately need both. We need both. Desperately.
So this deep dive started with a heavy philosophy text, but I feel like we ended up somewhere pretty human. We're talking about giving people permission to make sense in their own way.
And realizing that when they don't make sense to us, it might be a translation error, not a processing error.
I want to leave you, the listener, with something to chew on. We've talked about the brick-by-brick world we live in. Schools, doctors, performance reviews, it's all bricks.
It is hard to unsee it once you notice it.
But here's the question. If our entire world is built on the assumption that knowledge must be assembled linearly, what happens to the truths that can only be seen when you look at the whole pattern at once? Are we missing half the picture? Maybe the most beautiful half? Simply because we refuse to step back and stop counting the bricks.
I think we probably are.
A huge thank you to Jaime Hoerricks for this mind-bending piece. It's not often you read something that makes you question the architecture of your own thoughts.
It definitely changed how I'm going to listen to people from now on.
Same here.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening. We hope this deep dive gave you a new pattern to look at.
Don't lose sight of the forest.
We'll see you next time.